My YouTube channel, youtube.com, or what is it called again? Jay Partridge's channel. And I'll put a link on Teams tomorrow on it, but I will have almost every class on. At least one day for each American history class. And one problem I have is, yeah, I'll be a little bit different each period. I always get off on things because I don't have a script per se. And I have nothing written down here. So it's all from my memory. I know I probably should to keep me in order, but I don't. I have this. All right, so let's go through your notes out. And where do we finish here? Yeah, class-based racism. There are three elements that racism, and it did not start with color and skin. What did it start with first? Yeah, that economic system, which was slavery in the colonies. And Bacon's rebellion was like, oh, no, we can't unify. So what did they create? Well, not yet. And trust me, they weren't sitting there going, how do we create racism? No, we don't want these guys to unify. So what did they create? Laws, which we call, well, fornication laws was the most important of generically what was slave codes. And then after that, what did that create? Yeah, socially how people acted, they just got, oh, this is natural. There is a difference between the races, or that calls it that hierarchy of races. And I know you have a book out now, but not now with the book. Put that away so you don't miss anything. And is that my pass? See it, suckers. I'm out of here. You know. And so Bacon's rebellion was put down, but it did lead to racism. And I can't emphasize that enough about that hierarchy. Because once you establish that, it gave a kind of proof to the hierarchy of, they'd always thought there were certain people on top, but now it's going to be based upon color of skin, and they can divide everything by that. And that would justify what for Europeans in the Americas? What did that justify them doing? Yes. Say it again. Slavery, yes, but and doing what to the land? Yeah, take it. Call it settling. They're not really using it. And this was justify colonization elsewhere. What else did it justify? Well, not necessarily free, but you can make them do. Yeah. What did they do about the relationship between the sexes? That's part of it, fornication law. How did that deal with men and women? It was already kind of happening, but once you kind of establish this idea that there's differences, yes. So that sets up whether or not be black, white, difference in races. This also would justify though how husbands treated wives. Wives actually lost. Okay, they didn't have in European society. Women did not have many rights, but they actually lost rights going into the 19th century. This would help justify it. Women in some colonies, in some states, could vote going into the 19th century. They lost those rights. So it kind of justified a lot. This is a big, big, big deal. And therefore, it's much more complex than just simply saying, I don't like somebody because they don't look like me. It's much more complex than that. AKA, it's nuanced. Where did we get to? Okay, so did we mention imperialism? So we got imperialism, but the big thing is, so this would allow from the colonies, for the wealthy landholders in the southern colonies to create plantations. The north, yes, it happened there, but remember, they don't have plantations. The north, the land is different there. More mountain valleys, it's more rugged, lots of small farms, but it's going to develop differently. There will be that hierarchy, but not as extreme as in the south, where they have these big plantations. Just by the nature of the geography. Influence is there, wealth will lead to other things, but this would help establish these plantations, and Britain all they care about, the government there, is getting that money in. And so, with that, it is interrelated. Growth of racism, huge. Oh, did I talk about then, like the Civil War? Who fought that? Did I mention that?
Yeah. All the people.
And probably never will. And what else? What was the one thing that like poor whites could say? Yeah, they were free, we're better than them. And you get rid of slavery, I'll lose that little bit I have. Did I mention Little Rock Central High in here? So Little Rock Central High, 1957, was the first school in the former Confederacy that was integrated under the court decision Brown versus the Beacon Board of Education. Now, we will obviously come back to this. So I'm just kind of telling you a story. Some of you have probably heard of Little Rock Central High. We will come back to Little Rock Central High. But, in fact, 2 days ago was the anniversary of that first day. They picked 9 students, black students, to go to an all-white school. But also should tell you, like, they didn't want to put too much stress on white students. Thought was, oh my goodness, there'd be people who don't look like them. But it's more important than that. They picked a school of working class people. These are all segregated schools, so all white school. Working class. People who didn't have much. Parents were hoping, okay, children don't have much, but we'll give them a little bit better life than I have. They don't have much, but what's the one thing they have? Better than them. And now we're taking that away by allowing people who are white to go to school. We're losing that little bit we have. And what happened? Oh, sure, the students, I'm not talking about, the students would be horrific. The majority of students were those 9 black students. But the parents, or just people who didn't have kids in school but didn't like it, they came and protested at school and shut it down. I should ask, why do you think they chose that school?
So they could, why did they choose the school?
Why did the school board of Little Rock, Arkansas choose that school to be the first one? What were they hoping would happen? Yeah. And what did they assume how they would react? Yeah.
They assumed that they would react the way they.
Yeah, they wanted it to fail. Very good. So you're exactly right, all three. Very good. That's example of that big rebellion. That's why this is such a big deal. 1676 is a key year. Yeah, they remember before that, slaves are still kind of this vague servant. They might be free, they might not be. Everything changed here. And once you get to the creation of biology that came with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, then they gave scientific background. See, evolution proves there's a hierarchy. It doesn't, but that's what they said. So this is going to start creating. Then now we get this kind of the labor system, this kind of economic system, or kind of the new heading. Colonial economy. So we didn't mention imperialism in here yesterday, right? So Britain is creating an empire. Empire or imperialism comes from the Roman Empire, a position before the empire called imperator. But what they created was, my pen is working, thank you. Imperialism. Imperialism. Which is creating an empire, but for a reason. Now, obviously, we all are probably thinking money, but it's a little more complex than that. Think in more terms of profit. Because the empire could also be, look how big our empire is. We are much better than you. We have more land. So going into the 20th century, they would make maps and then they would put like the British Empire red, and it covered the entire globe. The French Empire was always in blue. That France would conquer, a little more complex, conquering, but all this area here. This is Sahara Desert. They weren't going to make a lot of money out of that, or France. But the profit was, look at our empire. This is all blue. The United States will get into this, but they want money out of it. So imperial policy. So British imperial policy would first, we'll let these companies or individual people start colonies and tax them. But eventually we're coming to an important imperial policy. And it's a word we need to know. Mercantilism. Mercantilism. Now, mercantilism is a state-sponsored economic policy. Economic policy. It's a state economic policy. So mercantilism is a form of an economic policy. Like socialism is an economic policy. Capitalism, you could have different versions of it, like Keynesian economic policy, or trickle down, or conservative economic policy. Yes, we'll get to all of that. So you probably have an idea, but we'll get to it. This is a state economic policy. And I said economics. My assumption is you've all heard that term, have an idea what it means, but we've got to make sure we know what it means. Because usually when I think economics, people think like, I'm going to give people, it's business. No, this is not business. This is not like running or operating a business. This is not like or operating a farm. It's more complex than that. Economics is another term we need to know. And economics, I should add, my definition and what I'm talking about here would have made no sense to somebody. These are all creations and then looking back. Like the British did not call their policy mercantilism yet. They copied the French, who named it at the end of the 17th century. Economic policy is this. How does a state, country, or a person, people, groups of people, how do they deal? How do they deal with scarce resources? How do they deal with scarce resources? And that could be creating a business or any number of things, but how do they deal with it? Now, what do I mean by scarce resources? Things like food, shelter, clothing, heat. That's scarce resources. So you might get somebody who would decide, well, I'm going to try to accumulate, at the point of a gun or a spear, I will accumulate the food and then sell it and get rich. But that is a form of economics. Or we can decide as a state, we'll make sure that everybody has an equal amount of food. Or everybody will have cheap water, or I'll get all the water because I'm stronger than you and sell it at a profit. How do we deal with scarce resources? So that is farms, businesses, bigger businesses, shipping, all of that applies under economics. How do we deal with this? So here is Britain, and they look at it as, okay, we want to accumulate food, money, wealth, all of these things. It is scarce. We have other countries competing with it. How do we do it? Well, we will adopt what we'll eventually call mercantilism. And mercantilism is this. Here's Britain thinking, okay, backtrack again. The term comes from, it would be more perfected under, some of you might have heard of a French king by the name of Louis XIV. Came under in his reign, the term mercantilism came. But the British or other countries are doing it before. So there's a finite amount of wealth in this world. There's a finite amount of wealth that is easily tradable. The term is fungible. You'll all accept this wealth. There's a finite amount. And so if we have this much wealth and we get more, that means we must be taking it from somebody else. So if there's only so much gold, if we accumulate more, other countries are losing it. So that is our policy. We want to take from them. If we don't, they will take from us. That's not the way the world works, but that's the way they viewed it. And they viewed it logically because what was the kind of wealth that everybody accepted in Europe? Wealth made from wealth that came or would be represented by what? metal. Gold, and to a lesser degree silver, but gold. So mercantilism was to accumulate as much gold as possible. Now, I told you about when they thought they got to Jamestown and they stuck their, they thought they would just shovel up that sand and become rich. That's right, I told that Tuesday, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, the thing is, they actually knew intuitively after that too, or before that too, they're not going to be just finding gold just growing from trees in the new world. So they're going to have to figure out ways to make it. How do you make gold? Oh, I should add, silver to a lesser degree, but silver is not as valuable. Do you know why? That's to a lesser degree, but there's metals that are more rare than gold. But they're the same thing for both. You can do it for silver too. Yeah.
They assigned.
They said it?
They said gold is.
This goes back to ancient Sumeria. I know you're wondering, when are we going to get to Sumeria? Today again.
Yeah.
And they're going through ways to store wealth. How do you store wealth? Free bank, but that's coming. How do you do that? Well, you need something that you can hold, you can put a stamp on it, and will last long. Well, they had iron. Actually, they tried barley and grain first, but the problem with barley and grain is people eat it. They had iron, but what does iron do? Let's say if it gets wet, it rots, so that loses some of its value, loses its beauty, it doesn't last as long. Tin is brittle and breakable, so that's not very good to store well. Copper tarnishes. Look at the capital of Helena. That's a capital of Helena. The capital of Helena. The capital in Helena. The rotunda, the dome is copper. And you notice it's green? So copper looks great at first, but then turns green. Lead is too soft. I know poisonous, but they didn't know that yet either. Silver tarnishes. Not as badly, but it tarnishes. Does gold tarnish? You can shape it easily. So it's relatively soft compared to, let's say, iron, but it's not as soft as lead. It is not brittle. That is how gold is done. Very logical reasons. Logical. This goes back 6,000 years. So gold. What do we call gold coins? There's a name for it. That's a form of gold coin, but this is generically, that's what's specie. Specie or gold coins. Specie. So you accumulate gold, you hold on to it, and then you issue pieces of paper or something like that say, hey, we're backing this with stuff you can trust. What do we call the pieces of paper? Yeah, currency. What backs American money today? Yes. Yeah, it's not gold anymore, but it's not about, even though it has something to do with wealth. Yes. That might have a great effect on it, but money is issued by the United States government, and it's based on the fact that the United States government. No, nothing to do with gold. Nothing to do with gold at all. The United States government has wealth, and we have wealth because the United States government does two things. That is an effective system to collect taxes, and the U.S. government always pays back its debts. The United States has never not paid back its debts. We always pay our debts. And so because everybody trusts the United States to pay back its debts, they trust that money has value. So we have to collect taxes and pay back our debts. If they believe the government can't collect taxes and pay back debts, nobody will trust their money and their currency. What happens to the value of that currency? Drops like a rock. Has anyone ever heard of hyperinflation? That happened in Germany in 1923. It happened in Venezuela. It kind of still is. It happened in Zimbabwe a decade ago. Happened in Argentina. Happened in Afghanistan right now. It's never happened here. It happened in the Confederacy during the Civil War.
Isn't it like in Germany when they have real girls hold money and they could file?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, prices were doubling about every hour. Can you imagine that? So what happened? If you have a savings account, it's worthless by noon. We've never had anything close to that. Yes, the U.S. has always paid back its debt. If you want to invest in money, loan money to the U.S. government. It's the safest investment. Yeah, the U.S. government owns money, but they owe money and money they create. So, because people trust it. So we owe money, but yeah, just now if we also if our government becomes unstable, which remember we had an insurrection effort a couple of years ago. The government's not quite as stable as it was just even a decade ago. But if people begin to believe our power to tax, then that debt becomes an issue. Then, all right. So that's specie. How's that for a very quick little thing on gold? So you have a question, or just yeah? Very quick, but in your response for what you missed. All right. So with that, how do we get gold? Well, they obviously can't just dig it out. So what they do is this. Trade. They want to trade. Let's find something that other people want and then sell it to them. And what do we get for that? Gold. What do you call the form of trade where you make it and then sell it to another country? Do people in another country? Is that exports or imports? Exports. So they want to maximize exports. Ideally, minimizing imports. So very little gold is going out, but then gold from, let's say, France or what's going to become Germany or Spain, that's coming in. Therefore, accumulate gold. We take from them. The problem is, remember, Britain stole this from France. So what's France doing at the same time? The same thing. And all these countries are going to try to do the same thing. I should add, there is not a finite amount. That's not the way it works. That's what they believe. There's no finite amount of wealth. There's a lot of wealth. You're always accumulating more. Okay, how you measure it, what you do with it, that's a different story. So what do they want colonies for? Colonies. Oh, backtrack for that. So let's go right. Colonies then will provide raw materials. So for example, Britain had cut down virtually every tree on this island. In fact, almost every tree in what is England, so the southern part of that, by the middle of the 1600s. They cut down all the trees. Anybody know why they cut down the trees? Not paper, even though they were making paper by then, not a lot. So what else?
They want to sell it.
Okay, boats, a little bit on shipping, and they want to sell, but it's actually something even more. Yeah. A little bit, but yeah. We're close, but not quite yet.
they had like
So it's a good idea for heat, but it's even more cosmetic in a way. Heat, sand, you create what? Glass. Glass in mirrors became the craze. You could have a glass window, you could paint. Glass windows and nails, you're big time. I'm not kidding about the nails. Nails are relatively valuable. They have to make nails by hand. So to show your wealth, you pound a bunch of nails in your door. The more nails in your door, that seems so amusing today because of the Industrial Revolution, nails are really cheap. Relative. Going into the 20th century, the side of wealth, they put pineapples. Pineapples! We've made it. Yeah. So, whenever you see anything that's decorated with pineapples today, that's a legacy of about 90. That was in the style. Pineapple wallpaper. You know, it seems funny now. And then what is it? Now, they make the colonies only sell to the mother country. They make it sell only to the mother country. And if the colonies can only sell to the mother country, so New England can't sell their trees, which someone mentioned shipping. Going into the 18th century, they wanted the long, tall pines that were here for ships, mats. So they used them up for glass, and now they need them from New England. Been to New England, it's amazing. It rains a lot more. I know we have trees here, but wow. They can't sell to France. If Massachusetts, the lumber yards can't sell to France, can't sell to Spain, they can only sell to British merchants. What happens to the price they get in New England? If they can only sell to British merchants. Yeah. You're thinking it the wrong way around. You're on the right track, but now, instead of a bunch of buyers bidding the price up, there's only one. Yeah, it goes down. So they say, yeah, we're only going to pay half of what you want. And what are they going to do? That they can't sell to anybody else. There's a great economic term for this called monopsony. We'll get to monopsony now. And then, what does the mother country provide, aka Britain? What's that?
Taxes.
Oh, they're coming to taxes, but they provide the manufactured goods. Now, this is pre-industrial revolution, so it's mostly made by hand, but they take those goods and turn it into something that they can sell to France or sell to whom? Back to the colonies. So the colonies, therefore, become a captive market. You make sure that the colonies can only buy goods from Britain. There you get the monopoly. And what kind of prices do they have to pay for these goods in the colonies? They go up and up and up. And that's mercantilism. We don't let the colonies produce anything there. We make them buy from the colonies, and we rob them in raw materials. That's colonial policy. It's literally to suck all the wealth out of the colonies and leave ruin. And then usually they leave. You're free now. Good luck. You don't believe me? Go to Africa. There's reasons why. It happens in the United States. We have things like colonies right here, very close to Helena. You've been abused. Butte is basically like a colony. They came in, they took all the ore out, they paid the workers, not very good. There used to be 120,000 people in Butte. They sucked it all out. That money went east and built mansions along Fifth Avenue in New York. And what was left in Butte when the copper was gone? A big pit full of poisonous water. And Butte's kind of cool, but isn't it like a big ghost town? That's colonization. Now, the English settlers who went there to take this land, yes, from somebody else, but they thought, I'm going to have these rights as Englishmen. Look at what they're doing. This happened in India. Much of the cloth that would become popular in the world in the 1800s, 1900s through today. Is anyone wearing denim, jeans? Yeah, that's from India. They took that manufacture, the British took that manufacture from England, they took that process back to England, and then didn't allow the Indians to make it for themselves anymore. They took the Indian cotton and then sold it back with cloth at a huge profit. India obviously still deal with that to this day. So, with that, we get to a couple things really quick. Pretty good at racing, huh? I need a new board. They passed a series of laws in the 1650s. Ironically, during the Commonwealth, after the king was killed, but when a new king came back, Charles II, they kept these laws because they liked them. And this is going to enforce mercantilism. You might see them called the Trade and Navigation Acts, but more and more we're just calling them the Navigation Acts. It's actually a few laws, but we lump into a couple things. All colonial trade must be on British ships and go through Britain. So on British-owned ships. Now, what are British-owned ships? Merchants from London or Southampton or Portsmouth or Liverpool. And they must go to Britain, or at least on a British ship. So the New England colonies can't trade with Cuba, which was a Spanish colony. And that would allow for the collection of a duty. A duty is another word for a tax. And what they did is they put this duty on all commodities. Commodities are anything you just buy or sell. So like grain is a commodity, tobacco is a commodity, lumber is a commodity, frozen concentrated orange juice is a commodity. They didn't have a lot of frozen concentrated orange juice in 17th century America, but just imagine they did. But it changed everything. Gold is a commodity. People buy and sell it. And they just kind of invent what's going to be valuable. Bitcoin is a commodity that people buy and sell, hoping to get rich. That's all it is. Yeah. Say it again. Oh, good. That's fine. Bitcoin is a scam, so please don't do Bitcoin. Please don't buy Bitcoin. Don't do it. Very good. I'm sorry, I beat your dog. They were like, oh, I did it. I'm sorry. Okay. Back to this. You would go, oops. It's called a Ponzi scheme. But moving on. So you see what happened? Now, trying to come up with a tax to enforce the Navigation Acts, Britain is going to try for the next 125 years. These trying to get the Navigation Acts to work will be what caused the American Revolution.
Was it tea?
Well, tea would be taxed too. So commodities are going to a whole list of things. They actually call them enumerated or listed commodities. So they're going to try sugar, tea, all sorts of things. And so with that, and then they tried a number of acts to restrict colonial industry. To restrict colonial, I'm going to put down manufacturing. Once again, this is pre-industrial revolution, pre-capitalism. So they passed a law, so that's supposed to be restrict. Imagine that's an R. How about this? Shut your eyes, close and tight, and imagine the word restrict. Open it, you'll see restrict. Life is so easy. The power of positive thinking. So they passed the Hat Act. So colonists could not make what? Hats. Everybody wore hats. Iron Act. You get the point? Can't make iron goods. They passed the Ship Act. Can't make ship. Can't make ship. Can't make ship. They passed the Molasses Act. Okay, they didn't make molasses there, but what really high value commodity was made from molasses? What's it? What's that? Say it. What's it? Sarah. No, good guess, but no. I thought you said Sarah. I couldn't get out of my head. Sarah. What? And someone else, first bird said cookies. No. Rum. Rum is made. So sugar is distilled. It transports easier with molasses, and then they make rum. And rum was very profitable. But to get the point with these, here's the problem. Could Britain enforce these? They could pass the laws, but London's here. Big ocean. Here are laws. Okay? We love your laws. We don't care. And so ironically, Britain could not force the mercantilistic laws. And this is going to allow for a creation of not only a unique economic system in the colonies, but also, as it turned out, very vibrant trade in Britain between very vibrant trade between Britain and the colonies. This actually, by not enforcing mercantilism, led to more economic growth. And historians down the road are going to come up with a name for this. I know the name? Salutary, which means something good or positive. Salutary neglect. Britain could not enforce the Navigation Acts. They couldn't enforce it. Salutary, back when people were letter writers, handwritten letters, one of the ways to say goodbye would be salutations, J. Salutations is like saying best wishes. So this implied actually, this helped Britain. This helped British merchants because it encouraged a more vibrant colonial economy and therefore more trade. Mercantilistic restrictions stifled trade. This opened up trade. 3 reasons why this happened. The first one is obvious, distance. The second one, the colonists just ignored it. More and more, they were saying, we have this strange new word, certain liberty, and this infringes. But also, constant and continuous war. Britain was at war the whole time. So they're distracted and need colonial support. And what European power was Britain fighting almost continuously at this time? And on that happy note, it's lunchtime! Aren't you sad we're not going to have another iReady test until like January? That could be your last iReady test. Because you guys didn't take the ACT. Unless you're a sophomore. Have a good day, everybody. See you tomorrow. Right when you find work, hang by your thumbs. We'll see you. Goodbye. I'm going to stop recording. Bye. Oh, if everything goes wrong, I'll head back to this in tomorrow.